The Nike Zoom Fly 5 and the Asics Magic Speed. Which one is the better daily carbon plate trainer? Let's compare and contrast both shoes and let's just talk about them. So before we get into it, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're subscribed watching the content. Thanks so much, I love you guys a lot. Make sure you subscribe to, my Strava, my Instagram, or follow me on those social medias, just for all sorts of updates for marathon training and things like that. So without further ado, let's get into it. The specs for both shoes are here respectively, and I'll just get right into it. So unless the specs have something to do with both shoes in terms of comparing them, I'll address them that way. So specs again are up there. We'll just get right into it. I'll start with the older of the two shoes, which is the Magic Speed in this particular case. So immediately, one of the major differences between both shoes is the weight. So it is 8 ounces on average for this shoe. I have it in about 8.5, so it might be a little bit less. And then in the Zoom Fly 5, it's about 10 ounces. Why would we say that the weights are ultimately different if they both have a similar profile? Well, maybe it's just a design thing overall. In this particular case, the Magic Speed is built with like really minimalist material and half a carbon plate, which is just literally running just the first, 4 foot to mid-foot area of the shoe, and then it cuts off. There's no carbon plate in the heel of the shoe at all. So that is a way for Asics to essentially cut a lot of the weight on the shoe in terms of the outsole and just foam designing in this process. So again, this upper I think is very light, and it's pretty much very see-through. Not a lot of moving parts in this particular material that would add an extra wool coating or anything like that during the winter runs. And it's built quite tight, and as a result, what happens is the toe box of the shoe can get tight at times, and it also has an interesting side effect of being extraordinarily stiff at times as well. But I think over time, the shoe's stiffness does get a little bit easier as the shoe kind of meshes to your, foot and your strike pattern, and that ultimately kind of goes into your liking. So that would be also a commonality between that and the Zoom Fly 5 is that, again, this shoe will have points where it's quite stiff as well early on. I'm about 50 plus miles into the shoe right now, and the stiffness is starting to finally break apart, which is kind of what I was looking for overall. So in this case, in terms of contrasting the uppers, again, there's a little bit more of a textile build on this shoe. There's still kind of like this inlay sock, which might be kind of hard to see here on the side, which the Magic Speed has a very similar one, kind of goes across the entirety of the inside of the shoe, where this one just has kind of like a one ridge kind of coming across, basically like these holy designs here in the middle foot of the shoe, quite literally. And yeah, basically there's a lot more things going on in the heel collar in terms of like the tongue having a little bit more mesh. There's a lot more cushioning around the heel cup of the shoe, the lip of the shoe, whatever you want to call it. So it's designed more for having a little bit of additional comfort during your run overall. So that's kind of the major trade-off, whereas here in the Magic Speed, there's only one pillow that's really kind of going here in the back that follows the heel cup, but the rest of this kind of has just, this textile piece rolling on the side, and there isn't much side guard on this particular shoe, which kind of makes it also very interesting in terms of walkdowns as well. And again, this tongue on this shoe is gusseted. The one on the Zoom Fly 5 is not. It's just kind of a straight across kind of tongue. It's kind of the deal overall with it. And as I mentioned before, this one only has half a carbon plate running across the Fresh Foam Blast that this shoe is using, where in the Zoom Fly, or the Zoom X Foam in this case, we have a carbon plate that's going pretty much the length of the shoe, following this green lay of the shoe, pretty much just kind of sandwiched in between that. But it is one piece of Zoom X Foam just kind of going across as well. Next piece that I think it's worth addressing is the locks of the shoe. So what I've experienced at this point in time with the Zoom Fly 5 is that there's some pinching points on the upper of the shoe in terms of the way it kind of locks. So in my left foot right now, I have a bit of swelling that occurs when it's cold, and I'll feel some pinching on let's imagine this is the left foot, on this like particular piece of the textile right here that follows the arch area. So that's just something I've been noticing, and it's kind of uncomfortable, and you have to loosen the shoe at that point to essentially have a more comfortable run, and then you'll have to like tie it back up later on when the shoe like finally kind of de-swells. So lesson for the young kids, basically the idea here is that you want to have proper warm-ups and give yourself enough time for for your foot to more or less adjust to the shoe before you just go, you know, do your workout or your daily run in that particular case. Now, the lock in here, as I mentioned before, it is quite stiff as a lock. What I've also experienced is a bit of like heel slippage in this Magic Speed, which is something I wasn't really too keen about early on. Now that heel slippage kind of fixed itself over time as I got the lock sorted out, but it was quite noticeable that, again, this pillow just wasn't holding my foot down nearly as much as I would have liked to, and it was, you know, kind of disappointing for the first couple of runs, and I eventually got it, and like, I think most people will agree based on the comments I've read on previous videos that it takes a little while for the shoe to finally get a grasp on your foot. But once it does, it's a pretty decent shoe overall. Now, the last thing I'll probably note is the sensation of the shoe having a counterweight in the forefoot area in the case of the Zoomfly 5, which encourages the runner to have this forefoot strike. And yeah, that's still a prevalent sensation while running in the Zoomfly 5 in this case, where my foot wants to have this forefoot strike because there's like an offset imbalance, as you can maybe sort of see based on the way you're just kind of like balancing the shoe from shoelaces. Maybe if I like even hold it somewhere here, even this might be too much, like somewhere dead center in the shoe, you can kind of see that there's a sensation of the shoe wanting you to have that forefoot offset weight scaling. And yeah, that's just something I've noticed in this particular case. And it's something that isn't occurring as much in the Asics Magic Speed. And I don't think it's the intent for the Magic Speed to do this based simply on the specs that are presented. Because again, Asics markets this shoe as like a daily trainer that's supposed to be just comfortable for your nice and easy slow days. But I don't think the Magic Speed is supposed to be a slow day running shoe. Despite the fact that like the offsets of the shoe have it at about like 5 millimeters, but I think it's like 24 and 29 if I'm not mistaken. And basically the point of that is to give you more of that midfoot sensation and more of a recovery style run. So the advertisement makes sense. The specifics of the shoe in terms of those numbers also make sense. But having the carbon plate and then having it as an everyday trainer is kind of where I'm a little bit more suspicious about it, right? Because if I have a carbon plate, I envision the shoe wants to have some more speed, unless your idea is you want to be comfortable with running in a carbon plate shoe for race day. And in order to do that, you need to spend some time in a carbon plate shoe. That I would understand. So maybe I talked myself out of this argument, but yeah, the idea here is that I think the Magic Speed and any sort of carbon plate shoe for that matter, with an emphasis in the forefoot area, should be more of your speed, tempo, maybe like an upbeat kind of day rather than your recovery or easy run type of style running. And the same was advertised, I believe, when I saw the Zoomfly 5, where they advertised it more for your slower long day runs. And I can see why they would say that. But when I see that, you know, the specs are ZoomX foam, a carbon plate, I'm thinking you should have this for more of your tempo and slightly faster days and like at the absolute worst, an easy day kind of shoe. Now, if you want that long day type of shoe, I would personally go more for the Vomero 16 in this case, where again, it has the ZoomX and like an EVA foam associated with it. And without the carbon plate in the shoe and more of that Air Zoom pod, you're going to have a much softer, more comfortable long run than something with a little bit more stiffness like that, like this particular shoe. That's just my thoughts, and maybe I'll make the comparison video if you guys are interested in that in terms of a better long day or long run type of shoe between the ZoomX or the Zoomfly 5 and the Vomero 16. Maybe we'll address that at some point. But when we go into both shoes respectively of which one's the better carbon plate daily trainer, I would say there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, if you have brand loyalties to Asics or Nike, that's obviously something you would consider. If you've got like a brand loyalty to Asics, by all means, go with the Magic Speed. If you got it for Nike, go for the Zoomfly 5. It doesn't really matter. I was okay with both, but I'm currently leaning a little bit more for the Zoomfly 5 only because I got the lock right. I enjoyed the sensation of having this like forefoot counterweight, which encourages the forefoot strike. And overall, it's just a comfortable shoe around my ankle area. Whereas in the Magic Speed, the looseness of the ankle and having the sensation of your foot flying out of the shoe at any point in time while running, and the stiffness wasn't necessarily something I was actually a fan of. But over time, like, yeah, the sensation kind of disappeared, but that initial lock issue has put it at the point where, like, I've put maybe 100 miles in this shoe and I haven't really run in it in like a few months now. So it kind of sucks like that, but it is what it is. But again, at this point in time, if I had to recommend a tempo carbon plate daily trainer, I would lean more for the Zoomfly 5. But if you had to go from an everyday perspective, I would probably lean for the Asics Magic Speed. So it's going to come down to your carbon plate utility in terms of your run. Do you want that everyday speed, or do you want more of a tempo kind of threshold move? That's probably where I would line these shoes up on my graph of speed versus comfort, and moving up on that graph. That's kind of where they would sit, you know. So I think I'll leave the video here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.